Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. Today I've got a Sauer P320 and an HK VP9, this is the B version, both chambered in 9mm. Please don't forget to check out our website. Go to our affiliates page. You'll find discount codes for things like Mantis Axe and Core belts. Link to that cool little bore light that we use for lighting up the barrels. Use those links, it will often save you money, never will cost you any additional money, and helps the channel. Thank you. So the HK VP9 is a little less well known than the Sig Sauer, but these are really turning out to be really capable carry guns. This is the larger version of it. There's also an SK that is basically a subcompact Glock 26 size gun. And over there with the P320, these are of course well known. And Sig Sauer has really gone all in with the P320 series. There's looks like a couple dozen variants of this available now. They're still sticking with the grip frame concept that you see, where you can have a serialized fire control group internally that's as easy to remove as just pulling out this holding pin and swap it out with whatever grip frame. That is a nice concept. In the early days, there was a lot of trouble with the availability of the grip frames. Finding the one you wanted in the size you wanted was very, very difficult to do. And if you did find it in the right size, then getting it in the appropriate color and stuff like that was even worse. I think they've really kind of somewhat resolved that. If you go to Sig Sauer's site, there's a lot of variations with the add to cart button. It doesn't tell you it's in stock, but you got the add to cart button. So they may have resolved some of this grip frame issue. And there's now variants of it that are optics ready. They've even got one that's a alloy frame, kind of like what Walther did with the PPQ. And you can swap out 1911-ish grip panels and things like that. Now the VP9 has done it very similar to all the other manufacturers. You have these little back straps, and it comes with it. So out of the box, you can customize this gun to fit your hand. There is a larger and a smaller version of this available, but you are buying the complete gun. With the Sig Sauer, if you don't buy the size that you want, then you're hunting for grip frames. So depending on what you're looking for, if you're in a state which is very restrictive, that Sig Sauer might be useful because you can have multiple guns without only buying one gun. But and there is an optics ready version of the VP9 as well. With the VP9, like the Glocks, the Springfield XDM, and many of the others, these back straps allow you to customize the grip to your hand right out of the box, so you don't buy the gun and then go hunting. So kind of depends on what problem you're trying to solve, which one of those two strategies is going to be better. Both of these are reliable. Both of these have comfortable ergonomics. Kind of got the finger groove thing going on the VP9 and more of a smooth on the P320. The no finger groove thing is kind of at the moment kind of the rage. Kind of goes back and forth, it cycles. But these finger grooves are just enough to be there and be useful, but they're not so overt that if your fingers are bigger that you have this little ridge poking into you. So this is comfortable for pretty much anybody to hold. So I'm going to go ahead and pick the thing up. Of course it's empty. And it does give you a full 3-finger grip in this particular variant. So it's comfortable, easy to hold, and easy to stay on track. Now the SK version of it will kind of give you a 2.5-finger grip because it shortens the grip a little bit. On the Sig Sauer, depending on which version you buy, this particular one happens to be the Carry. So you've got that 3-finger grip, but depending on which version of it you buy or which grip frame you swap out, you can get shorter and longer grip frames to do what you want to do. Both of these guns have a significant beaver tail, so that whichever one of these you're holding on to, you're going to be up and away from the slide as it goes back. The SIG, the slide's fairly high up. It's kind of hard to get slide bit by these simply because the slide's so high up. On this one, you really get deep in there. So the slide is not as high up, but you're kind of deeper in. So either one of these is very unlikely to give you a slide bite. They've got serrations front and rear on both of them. And the serrations are different, but they're fundamentally the same. They're just kind of slashes that make it easy to get a hold of it front or rear. Now the VP9 does kind of double down with these little wings. And what those give you is kind of a shelf for your hand to get onto. So if you have a little bit of a strength issue or your hands are slippery, you've got kind of one additional thing to catch to make sure that you can cycle it. And you can get an insert to pull these out and replace them and make it flush again. When I first saw this, I kind of thought that was kind of silly. I was kind of inclined to get rid of them, but actually using it and seeing how your fingers just natively come up against it when you go to cycle it, left them there because they actually work and they really don't get in the way. They're rounded at the edge so they don't bite into you or anything else. Now, if you've got a shorty holster that doesn't have a sweat guard, you might feel them. But if you've even got a minimal sweat guard on a holster, you're not going to feel these. So it's actually kind of a cool feature. And the SIGs are equally usable. They're easy to get a hold of. The SIG slide is a little bit lighter. And of course, that's going to vary by caliber. This is a little heavier feeling slide, but not ridiculous. We'll pop the magazines out on these. And we'll talk about the dimensions of them. Dimensionally, this particular combination is similar enough to not make a difference. So the SIG, which is the one on the top here, is 7.4 inches long. The VP9 is 7.34. The SIG is 1.3 inches thick. The VP9 is 1.32. 5.5 inches tall in this particular grip frame. 5.41 inches tall. SIG has a 3.9 inch barrel. 4.09 in the VP9. So yeah, there's differences, but they're so minimal that that size difference within these two categories isn't going to make the difference whether you would be able to easily carry one or the other. Sometimes you'll have gun manufacturers that, for example, their compact is more like a full size compared to another company's compact. That's not really true with this particular comparison. From a maintenance standpoint, both of them are lever style. They're both toolless disassembly, so they're easy to take apart and maintain. With the additional capability that the SIG, once you have it apart, you can pull this out and the whole grip frame will come out. From a safety perspective, both of these are considered drop safe, even though there's a lot of controversy around the P320 in that realm because it has no inertial safety. They did a recall a while back and they made some changes internally to mitigate that. But overall, my personal preference is that inertial toggle, because what that does is ensures that the trigger can't be inertially pulled by a drop, especially if it lands on the butt end, and inadvertently disable the other internal safeties. So with the exception of that particular difference, they both have the same internal piston style drop safeties that any other gun has. And the SIG does have some variants that come with a manual safety. You'll see where the cutout would be that if I had a fire control group with a manual safety, I'd pop that out in this grip frame to be able to use it. And the VP9, similar to Glock, PPQ, and many of the others out there, does not have any manual safety option available that I'm aware of. Now, I did kind of mention this is the B version. What does that mean? It's a button-style mag release, similar to what people are used to in the United States. The original VP9 had the paddle style, so it had a paddle right here, which is very common in the European guns. Both work. I like both. I can work with either, but a lot of times when the VP9 first came out with that paddle style release, people kind of rejected it because they wanted the button. They wanted what they're used to. They wanted it to be the same as every other gun they've got. So they did come out with the B version, and you can reverse it, but it is not ambidextrous. It does have an ambi slide stop slide release. You can see that here. The SIG Sauer has also an ambi slide stop slide release, and both tend to work. So I really haven't heard too many problems with people not getting the other side to work well. Sometimes a lot of guns will come out with that concept of the ambi slide stop slide release, but the one on this side will never work right. That doesn't seem to be the case with either one of these. From a sights perspective, both of them have some version of 3-dot sights, but it's kind of hard to get the sights to line up on camera. Both of them are available with the 3 dots you see here. These are phosphorescent on the VP9, and the SIG Sauer you can get it with the SIG Light night sights. And there are night sights, factory night sights available from the factory for the VP9 version as well. And both of these, it's easy enough to swap out the sights with the sights of your choice. But right from the factory, right out of the box, they both have very usable sights, whether or not you get the night sights. And you have a striker status indicator on the VP9. It'll be visible when the striker's in a cock status, and then otherwise it'll be gone. It doesn't protrude, so that it doesn't give you that tactile feel like when you're holstering. But on a striker-fired gun, that's not as useful as it might sound, because the difference between cocked and firing is so minute, you're not going to be able to react in time. But with the and then pull the trigger, and it just kind of moves a little bit. It kind of just moves back a little bit. And another way to look at it is if I put it in an angle where it's barely visible and then pull the trigger, it disappears. It's a cool feature. I don't find them particularly useful, but if the gun's up in front of your face and you've got it out, you can look, but at that point it's a little too late to deal with it. So I don't hate those types of features, I just don't find them overly useful. Both of them have rails, and on the SIG, depending on which grip frame you have, will determine how many slots it has, but all of them have enough slots to be able to put whatever it is you're wanting on either one of them. And of course Glock has kind of solved that problem for the whole world by only having a single slot, forcing all manufacturers who want their things to be able to work on Glocks, because it's a large market, to be adjustable. So when you take that into consideration, pretty much anything you're going to find, if it'll work on a Glock, which most stuff will, it's going to work on these rails. Now the SIG rail is not a true Picatinny rail, so they kind of adjust theirs a little bit, but it will work with Picatinny accessories. And this fits with the standard Picatinny rail design. But both of them are close enough that anything that's going to be usable on one would be usable on the other. Overall, I found these both to be nice guns. You get past the initial controversy the P320 had and get into the current production, where they've resolved most things. They're both nice guns, and they're both viable choices depending on what you want. From an MSRP perspective, the SIG starts out less expensive. There's variants of this that are down close in the 500 territory, but then depending on how you chase this line up, you can get yourself almost close to 2,000 for their fanciest version with the alloy frame and everything else. They've got one, I think it's called the Spectre, that's got all sorts of features, and you end up with a comma on the price tag. With the VP9, you're in the 800-ish territory for a plain one like the one you see here, and you get up just around 1,000 for the optics ready with night sights variant of it. So the SIG can be had cheaper, but can very quickly get more expensive. Both of them pretty much fit in the same territory if you just kind of go middle of the road. So if you want, an optics ready version with regular sights, you're going to be roughly the same price between the two of them. But I think if you're on a budget and you're looking between the two of these, you'll probably be able to find a SIG that'll fit your budget more easily than you're going to find a VP9 that'll fit your budget, because the range is tighter on the VP9. From a capacity standpoint, the SIG Sauer goes 17, 21, and 30, because the TAC Ops magazines, there was a variant of this called the TAC Ops with a threaded barrel, and it came with 30-round magazines, and those are available and they'll work in any of the 9mm SIGs. These used to be available in 940 and 45. It does appear that they've dropped the 40, but now they're doing 10mm. So current production seems to be 9, 45, and 10mm. The VP9 is technically available in a 40, but it's not called a VP9, it's called a VP40. But it's the same gun, chambered in 40 caliber. There is not a 45 version of it available at the moment, nor is there a 10mm. So these are more aimed at the mainstream self-defense, which of course is 9 and 45 in a lot of cases. 9 and 40 in a lot of cases. And this is appealing to a little bit wider audience, especially starting to get into the hunting crowd with the 10mm. So depending on the particular caliber that you prefer may drive one way or the other. And with the various barrel lengths and slide lengths you can get with the SIG, the only problem to consider is getting these slide conversion kits. So if you buy, let's say, this one and you want the full size, so at that point you're swapping out the slide and barrel. Those get to be almost as expensive as buying another gun, which again then cycles back around if you live in one of the very restrictive states where buying a gun, the serialized component, is a big problem. The P320 offers some relief there. If you actually are in a position to buy a second gun, other than changing the length of the grip, if you're going to change any of the characteristics like caliber or overall length of the barrel and slide, both of these are equal in that, because there's really no advantage in the SIG anymore at that point. The grip frame, maybe, but any other conversion beyond that starts to be almost as much as another gun. The only other consideration is look for those that are polymer haters that like metal frame guns. You can get the P320 in a metal frame version. But one thing to consider, HKs have always been polymer frames, and they've been used by special forces in the past, And of course, the P320 variants of it are being used by different branches of the U.S. military. So both HK and the SIG Sauer have seen their time in the military, and the current ones that they're using in the military for the P320 in many cases are the polymer frame. So polymer has gotten to the point, and HK's had it for a very long time, that they're just as durable and reliable and robust with a lot less weight, a lot easier to work with and carry around. So kind of gives you a little bit of flexibility depending on which one you want to do. So let's talk about the triggers a little bit. So on the VP9, a little bit of take up, but not excessive. That inertial safety just basically disappears. Nice short crisp brake. It's around in the 5-pound territory. Reasonable reset. It's not a super short reset like the PPQ, and you did notice there's a little travel, so you're not right on the brake, on the wall again. Pull it back, and then a nice short crisp brake. These have a good reset. I wouldn't call it a superb reset, but it's good, and it worked well at the range. And one of the things that I'll notice on it is when I'm doing the reset, there's a point where it kind of hangs up just a hair as it's resetting. It causes me to go off of the wall a little bit. But again, shooting at the range, I found this very easy to use and stay right on the reset. Now we'll talk about the SIG. SIG has less take up, then you're right on the wall. A little bit of a short but a slightly creepy feeling wall, and then the brake. Then roughly the same reset as the VP9, but I am right on the wall and it's easy to stay right on the wall. And then again, that kind of vague-ish pull, and then the brake. This trigger was good at the range. Sitting here at the table, of course, you can pick up every nuance of the trigger. A lot of that disappears when you're actually on live fire. I found these to kind of feel the same when I was on live fire. Some of the nuancy differences that I could see here sitting in a dry fire realm sort of disappeared. But overall, I like the trigger feel of the VP9. Actually, I had reversed them. I was tapping the SIG. I like the trigger feel of the VP9. Just the end-to-end experience of the trigger on the VP9 I like a little better. But it is going to come down to personal preference. And unlike some comparisons I've done where you can say that one trigger is vastly better than the other, I'm not picking that up. It's really going to come down to you. And to some extent, if I was at the range and you dropped either one of these in front of me, and that's what I had to use, pick it up and use it, it would work interchangeably. Given my choice, I'd probably buy the VP9, but either one of these is going to serve well. One important note just worth mentioning, the VP9 series does have polygonal rifling like the Glocks. The SIG Sauer is conventional rifling. Polygonal rifling generally gives you a little bit better pressure, a little bit better retention of pressure, so you get a little more velocity and sometimes a little bit better stabilization. But you can't shoot hardcast in most polygonal, whereas with the SIG, it's conventional rifling, which has worked for years and does work, and hardcast isn't going to plug it up as quickly. So if you're somebody that likes conventional or polygonal rifling and you don't like Glocks, the VP9 is definitely an option because it's that similar rifling as to probably the Gen 4 Glock or earlier, where the Gen 5's got that hybrid rifling, so that's a bit different. But polygonal rifling, conventional, kind of comes down to personal quick taste at that point. Beyond that, if you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, click that bell to be notified. Check so that you get notified if you do. Check us out on Patreon, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Getter, and now on Rumble. Kind of all over the place and expanding every day. Thanks.